Oh, my little Link. As I'm sure you know, our main man with the sock cap has had many faces throughout his long life. So many faces, in fact, that it seems even that very sock cap is becoming optional. While it's true that, excluding direct sequels, most Zelda games feature a new incarnation of him, Link has had roughly 3 faces he tends to wear. Starting with Ocarina and carrying all the way through to Tears of the Kingdom, we see the look that he has settled into. Intentionally androgynous, blue-eyed, often with pierced ears, a specific 90s anime look that has stood the test of time. It can be argued that the differences in design between, say, Link from Skyward Sword or from Twilight Princess constitute enough differences to count as separate, but it's inarguable that they are cut from the same cloth. He is, of course, sometimes a little cat-eyed boy. First appearing to a mixed reception in 2003's Wind Waker, this version of our guy has seen little variation in his surprisingly long tenure. Frequently being the form chosen for the handheld entries in the DS era, this Link was our faithful avatar for a long stretch of the franchise's life. When the game was first revealed at E3 in 2013, we were given a trailer and this illustration of an old friend. This is the Link of my childhood. Before I could even read all that well, I would watch my parents and older sister play A Link to the Past. I would be transfixed by illustrations of Link in the manual and guidebook. He was part warrior, part lonely adventurer, part goofball with a big nose and awkward sideburns. Even this version of Link has had his reappearances throughout the years, the stretch during his Game Boy Advance days bearing close resemblance to his mainstream counterpart. But honestly, the truth is, he feels the most like home to me when he is just the slightest bit of a dope. Eiji Aonuma went on to do a rare live appearance later that year at Comic-Con to interact with fans and to reveal more about this upcoming game. While undoubtedly being what I'm going to refer to as classic Link, the vibe from the first depiction is tense and serious, carrying the more stoic tone shared with most of his 3D brethren. But his final design is rendered more painterly, with soft round eyes and a slight smirk. It's no coincidence that this reveal took place at Comic-Con. In a time when the world was still so enraptured with comic book movies, I feel a familiar pang of excitement when I realize that the mural behind this Link is the same Link from the intro to Wind Waker. I'd recognize that drawing anywhere. It's the same kind of thrill as a post-credits cameo, and it feels like it was made just for me. The role of official art is often overlooked in modern video games. While it's true that Link looks like this and this, it's the role of the illustrations to show you that he might also look like this, or this. Pixel art, and to an extent even the lower poly models of this game, are understood to be representational. My feeling of isolation in A Link to the Past is informed by the moody painting of Link overlooking the perilous bridge to the Tower of Hera. While I wish he kept his pink hair, I understand when playing A Link to the Past that those blocky forms are in a lot of ways stand-ins for this. This need for clarification has obviously dimmed as the resolution and poly counts of our video games has increased. But in the not far off year of 2013, a need was still being filled on Nintendo's little handheld that could. While I did neglect to mention some extremely charming commercials made for Echoes of Wisdom, the official art for that game featured little more than high-resolution models from the game itself. With the art of A Link Between Worlds, there is an obvious care put into the renderings. A yearning for a bygone era is felt. This game released on the 3DS later in November of 2013 to complete commercial and critical success. The 3DS had been struggling through its early years, and A Link Between Worlds stands almost as a crown jewel of its eventual success. In a lot of ways, A Link Between Worlds is the quintessential Zelda game. It stays the course of a familiar narrative shape while still delivering something new. It toes the tricky intersection of remake, reimagining, and sequel with tact, and it's a game in love with itself and its past. It feels in love with me too. I find myself feeling a bit hypocritical here. This game is a direct sequel to the Super Nintendo classic A Link to the Past, its Japanese title wearing the rare 2 for a Zelda game. If you played that original game, the similarities between the two are blindingly obvious. In a lot of ways, A Link Between Worlds operates as a remake of sorts. In interviews, Aonuma mentions that Miyamoto frequently pestered him to bring A Link to the Past to the 3DS, and while it isn't said in so many words, it's obvious that this is a guiding intent behind A Link Between Worlds, to give the old revered classic a new life for a new audience. But still, its complete reuse of both the light and dark world maps is impossible to ignore. This video is part of a larger series I'm making reflecting on the design choices and themes behind top-down Zelda. The last title we covered was 2024's Echoes of Wisdom, and fresh off of the heels of criticizing that game for its blatant rehashing of content from previous entries, I realized that I'm in a bit of an emotional paradox. On one hand, I still think that A Link Between Worlds stands on top as my favorite of the top-down Zeldas. While it's true that it accomplishes the mastery of its journey because of the legwork done by its legendary older brother, it wears this so openly and proudly that I can only stand to admire it. It's a deliberate choice. A Link to the Past has talked about in interviews about this game in an almost worshipful tone. The world of A Link to the Past is lovingly recreated, and changed intentionally in ways that bear commenting on by the obsessive like me. Truth be told, if this had been sold as a remake of A Link to the Past, I would have had no complaints there either. This act of copying your own work, I think if done with intention and care, it can be done completely right. This game is selling itself on nostalgia, and sometimes that's what I'm in the market for. In an interview with Polygon, Aonuma answers an oddly poignant question about the much maligned Star Wars prequels. On the topic of Star Wars, I was one of the people who felt that way about the new films as well, so I think there's always this phenomenon where things in the past always end up getting viewed more favorably. It's an admittance to a certain kind of self-consciousness that's interesting to note now. And yet, even with such a relevant fear hanging over its head, with complete confidence and competence, a direct sequel is released 22 years after the original to applause. At this point, I have replayed this game more than any other Zelda, but it's only now that I've begun to learn of its development. I've noticed a really sad trend happening with discussions about games that Nintendo makes, and it's just that. It seems that the proper nouns often start and stop at the name of the company. Back in 2013, the late Satoru Iwata had been conducting interviews with staff at Nintendo on the various projects they created. A Link Between Worlds had a challenging development. Much of the staff was taken off to work on other projects during various points of its development, so it frequently hit brick walls. It's a surprise to Eiji Aonuma when he hears that Shigeru Miyamoto himself thought the game was good. What? Why doesn't he tell these things directly? It seems that Aonuma, who was the producer of this game, stays in the hot seat with me. I think a lot of the problems with modern Zelda come from questionable choices he makes as its captain, but here this small admission depicts a man craving his predecessor's approval. There's an amount of empathy I can't help but feel. He mentions in interviews that with the advent of the Miiverse, and so too the more direct communication between fan and creator on the internet, he has been acutely aware of and even seeks out fan expectations. Director of this game, Hiromasa Shikata, explains that after the 2009 release of Spirit Tracks, much of the handheld team went to work on the soon-to-be-released Skyward Sword. This left them as a team of 3. Shikata as director, Shiro Moriuri, lead programmer and assistant director, and one other oddly unnamed programmer. They were tasked with coming up with a concept for Zelda's next handheld entry. They worked on the game as this small unit for a year. Shikata says that after about half a year, just to get the project through, we decided to give a presentation to Miyamoto and have him say yay or nay. We didn't even have the idea of Link entering walls. We were thinking about a Zelda game with the theme of communication. As soon as we started the presentation, I could clearly see Miyamoto's facial expressions rapidly darkening. I thought, this is bad. And then at the end, he said, this sounds like an idea that's 20 years old. That was the killing blow. We were down on the floor. He had ripped it apart so badly that I was distraught. We decided to rethink it from the start, and one day when the 3 of us were having a meeting, I suddenly said, what about having Link enter into walls? Shikata seemed baffled at his own epiphany, asking his fellow teammates to explain to him why his own idea was so good. Lead programmer Shiro Moriuri was so convinced and determined to prove the worth of this core wall merging mechanic that he created a playable prototype overnight to present the next day. When this was presented to Miyamoto, he gave the team an immediate "let's do it." This is the right move, too. If broken down to what you do literally, it is decidedly basic. You can only move in 2 directions, but it feels so sneaky. It feels so good. Sound design does a lot of work to sell the small thrill of this gimmick. Many sound effects are lifted directly from the previous game, and the sound of going in and out of walls shares the same crunchy, meaty sound design as its bit-crushed elders do. It recontextualizes most surfaces. It's genius in its simplicity. I feel for Shikata, convinced wholly of his idea but unable to express why. Sometimes it just works. But the Wii U was soon to launch, and so development again reached a standstill while the team disbanded to work on launch titles for that console. Eventually, Aonuma resurrected the project, and programmer Kentaro Tominaga began work on the gameplay. Without letting myself be constrained by the world of The Legend of Zelda, I made a few small dungeons with entering the wall ideas I came up with. And then about May of 2012, I presented them to Miyamoto, saying that I would be making 50 more of these dungeons where you use the entering walls ability. He tore it up. But he didn't just criticize, he also gave us a hint. He suggested basing it on A Link to the Past. Aonuma used a 3D tool himself to recreate the landforms from A Link to the Past, and with this final presentation, it seems Miyamoto gave his blessing for the game's full development. Once you notice this in-game, you'll never be able to unnotice it, but everything is actually cheated towards the camera to make the perspective work. The game was also made to be 60 frames per second, not something typical for a Zelda game. This was to ensure the stability of the stereoscopic 3D afforded by nature of being on the 3DS. I have mixed feelings on this feature of the console. On one hand, I have an astigmatism that makes the effect fail more often than not, but there are certain times when I play this game in a slightly dim room, sitting perfectly straight with my eyes just so that it really makes me feel like I'm looking down into a little miniature world. The dungeons look like dioramas. This is, of course, damning with faint praise. This isn't something I could really share with you, given that I had to emulate this game to get footage. I don't think it's a necessary part of the package, to be honest. It works so little of the time for me that I frankly almost resent it. But long ago, Miyamoto conceived of Hyrule's shape by looking down and imagining a world inside his desk drawer, so I have a soft spot for the 3D experience. The cost of 60 frames per second to make the stereoscopic 3D stable did come at a cost in visual fidelity. While easier to ignore on a smaller screen, there is an unmistakable cruft on the models when presented on a full computer monitor. That being said, I was impressed at how much work the lighting did to set the mood in this game. Despite distracting jaggies, I still think the game has a unique look that time has been kind to. Shikata mentions wanting to rethink Zelda's conventions with this game, stating that, "I've worked on The Legend of Zelda for 15 years, and every time a new game is released, I hear opinions from my friends. More than a few people get stuck somewhere as they're playing and can't get beyond that point. I feel like that is a big problem." And so with this game, you can play multiple dungeons in parallel, and if you get stuck somewhere, there's always another approach ready for you to try, so if you don't give up, anyone can make it all the way to the end. This is truly the first game of the Wild era. You don't get to the structure of those two games without this one. I think it's almost noble, too. Shikata seems to want to make a game that his friends can complete, and given the widespread success of this new era of Zelda, maybe this is the better way for it to go. Success seems to be in that direction. And yet, despite this Hyrule's role in a change I'm still feeling the growing pains from, its old melody still pulls me back in. The Hyrule of A Link Between Worlds is unabashedly the one from A Link to the Past. Look, the grass still grows in an arrow pattern suggesting at an obstacle from a bygone era, a signpost from another time. Traversing this Hyrule is overtly familiar, but it's the same over-familiarity from a player like me that allows the game to have its surprises. As always, our Link is oversleeping. Gully, our best friend and child of the blacksmith we apprentice under, operates as our alarm clock. As we are quickly bustled to work, we see that this Link shares a house with his SNES forebear, but despite his young age, unlike that Link, no uncle is present. The only close adults seem to be the family he works for. We see how Hyrule has changed in the time between games. The forest path is cut through. The blacksmith, and by extension the village, is only steps away. These opening minutes have us carrying out a delivery task for our boss, and through a still misty morning we go about our day. Here a picture of Hyrule at peace is painted. While you can beeline for the task at hand, if you do, you miss a unique tone rarely present in a Zelda adventure. Much of the world is accessible in this state. Shops are yet to open for business, and it feels as if the game itself is slowly stretching its legs. In the decades between appearances, this is an appropriate early morning yawn for a long-sleeping Hyrule. There is little purpose to wandering Hyrule in this state. Many of its secrets to come are hidden behind conveniently unliftable boulders or bushes we can't yet cut down. No great evil is awake yet. Destiny hasn't called us. Everyone already knows our name. This is a world lived in and loved by our Link, and in minutes it feels like home. The gentle strumming that plays here makes it clear. This is the peace that all true warriors strive for. The golden promise of Hyrule and its happy ending. This ancient world has been recreated with love, and so it's by nature of being a copy that this version of home can deliver this tone. That's no Zelda game, of course. A maiden is soon captured, and the back way to her rescue has us trekking through a dungeon hidden below graves. On this channel, we've already had a few discussions on choices and what they mean when informing who our protagonist is. Here, I think it's quite interesting that Link can refuse the call to action. I think these options and similar ones in other games often reflect how the character might respond. We are the choices we might make. While we must inevitably raise the sword above our heads, we see that he might be a little scared. He's not entirely sure if he wants to do this. It's true that courage doesn't mean you lack fear, just that you choose to move forward anyways. So for this game in particular, it's very important that we see even our destined reincarnation still has his doubts. Here we meet the main antagonist of our game, the flamboyant and haughty Yuga. Coming off of dealing with the inert and dull Null, Yuga is a breath of fresh air. While mirroring the archetype of similar sorcerers before him, Yuga is an unmistakably unique villain for the series, viewing those beneath him as wriggling worms. He's on a quest for beauty and perfection. He spends the majority of this first act transforming people into art, enraptured with looks and image, wishing to obtain enough power to earn his rightful place among the gods. He's the kind of guy who sings his own theme song. What an icon. We are awoken back at our home by a strange man wearing a purple bunny mask and robe. This is Ravio, and he operates the item shop of A Link Between Worlds, giving us no choice but to let him use our home as both sleeping quarters and storefront. His attitude is unmistakably flippant, and a bit crass, shrugging off Link's questions on the safety of the bystanders of Yuga's assault. His mannerisms and eccentric tone bring to mind another salesman in purple. Unique to this game, key items such as the boomerang or hookshot are not found in the dungeon depths, but instead all are available for rent from Ravio for relatively cheap prices early on in the campaign. This provides an interesting tension that isn't really felt elsewhere in the series. While Onuma likens it to renting expensive equipment for a new hobby, it's with the consequences of death that the similarity to the soul system of Dark Souls is obvious. When Link is defeated, Ravio is quick to send his bird out to collect his things, leaving Link to have to rent all the items he needs again, no refunds. Now here's the honest truth, A Link Between Worlds is not a difficult game. If you are competent with the combat of top-down Zelda, there is little reason to not rent every item outright, for you won't find yourself dying all that often. Fairy fountains are plenty, and with multiple early game bottles available, it is decidedly difficult for Link to fall. However, this game isn't designed with just the competent Zelda player in mind. Back in my ripe young age of 22, I was a much sloppier player at A Link Between Worlds. I often would have to scramble to find rupees to rent the necessary item for whatever dungeon lay ahead of me next. There could almost be an adversarial relationship with the skittish, desperate Ravio. It's clear that he's eager to equip us for our journey ahead, the stinky old wristband he gives us being the only thing that saves us from Yuga's painting curse. And he is always our cheerleader, but he is clear that he intends to make as much money off of us as he can. It's interesting to hear him talk about game overs so explicitly. The series is no stranger to making game mechanics diegetic, but there is something almost intimate about him knowing that Link so often fails. It's an intrinsic part of being Link. After all, I've led him to his demise countless times throughout the years, but despite death, he does always find himself waking up back at home to try again. How interesting, then, that Ravio is aware of this. While his Shiro is ever by his side and visits us like a fairy after death, it isn't to bring us back. No, the purpose of his companion is all business. This makes Ravio quite the opportunist, ensuring that when we respawn back at home, the first thing we see is what he has for sale, and you can't help but wonder how a guy like him ended up with all the things we just so happen to need. Upon completing the campaign of A Link Between Worlds, Hero Mode is unlocked. For me, having played this game endlessly already, this is my preferred way to play. The difficulty is artificial, to be sure. Enemy damage output is doubled, ensuring that you are rarely more than a hit away from death in the early game. This makes Ravio's rental system shine. Even for the experienced player, running the risk-reward analysis of loading up on Ravio's goods adds a much-needed fresh feeling to the series. In effect, this opens up the game world much like the modern Zelda titles, and it's impossible to ignore this game's place as a stepping stone between eras. The first few dungeons may be done in any order you like, and once we find our way into the second act, the entirety of the Dark World can be solved in any which way you please, give or take a few choke points. Much of the world is populated with mini-dungeons. There is an overflowing of dungeon ideas from programmers, and it would seem that these ideas have spilled over into these optional challenges. This Hyrule is practically pregnant with rupees. While this can be unfulfilling in other Zelda games, there is use aplenty for money in this world. Ravio eventually lets you buy his items outright for a high price, saving any fear of the consequences of an unexpected death, but fully buying out his stock takes a decent exploration of both the worlds. Also, if you're crazy, it's really fun to max out your rupee count. In addition to front-loading the game with most of its tools, A Link Between Worlds also sees a radical shift to the ammo and magic system from previous games. The days of cracking open pots for bombs, arrows, and jars of green magic are over. Ravio's enchanted items all run on a purple bar of stamina that slowly refills over time. This recharge time increasing significantly if you deplete it fully. In a lot of ways, this allows you to become far more overpowered than you probably should be. But even still, the stamina system is such an elegant evolution of the games that came before. I do think it could use some fine-tuning. The cost per cast of, say, the Fire Rod and Tornado Rod genuinely should be doubled, because otherwise it runs the risk of being the most optimal and slightly boring solution to most combat encounters. However, unlike the last Zelda we looked at, this is a non-issue for one reason only. Even if they aren't as efficient, the other tools for combat are incredibly fun, so I use them because I want to. That's kind of what I'm realizing. Open-air design isn't inherently bad, but all these tools and options, they've gotta be fun. There really aren't that many tools in this game. If you compared its total item count to Echo's count, on a surface level that would make this game look weak. But I'd always rather have a few fun things with purpose rather than A few fun things with purpose and a whole bunch of garbage I have to scroll through. Scattered throughout the two worlds are 100 little buggers known as Mai-Mais. In many ways, they are precursors to the infamous Koroks of Breath of the Wild. The tight and highly curated world design of this game makes the Mai-Mais infinitely less aggravating to find. In addition to making noise when you're nearby, the game offers an extremely helpful map that shows you how many you have left to find in a respective area. They serve as a perfect objective between temples. The collection of 10 represents a permanent upgrade to any one of the tools you have purchased. Mentioned in whispers as a tremendously powerful being capable of traveling dimensions, Mother Mai-Mai is an odd, rhyming, giant emoji of an Octorok. There's something jubilant about the campy chorus that sings her song as you return her lost children. No real explanation is given for their singular ability to traverse the space between dimensions. Before, I mentioned wondering where Ravio got his tools, but when we eventually find his house, I can't help but notice his roof boasts a familiar color palette festooned with seashells. Early marketing material refers to them as fairies, but I like that they found life as a family of inexplicable interdimensional goobers. Near the Mai-Mais is another being stuck in the karmic cycle, the bearish shopkeep who has been with us since the very beginning. He seems to bemoan his role in this game, not being sure if he's up for sharing a post with all the weirdos around him. It's tough to write broadly and succinctly while still having character, but this game succeeds at making most of its cast memorable in some way. The first act of A Link Between Worlds does a masterful work at introducing you to the surprisingly broad cast of its 7 sages and the people they influence. Queen Auron is met on the critical path to getting the flippers and Pegasus boots. We see in her an echo of the theme of beauty, and the lengths of which even the virtuous will go to attain it. Due in large part to the brevity of the meetings, these little vignettes do much to endear us to the cast. The young witch Irene eventually becomes our fast travel system, and with her begrudging, sarcastic help, she's a simple but effective caricature. The kind that sticks in my memory far more vividly than most of her equivalents from recent Zelda games. Osfala believes himself to be the hero for this era, and we can see how living in a world of recurring prophecy might bring a certain type of guide to performative heroism, especially if it's for a girl. Early on in the adventure, at Ravio's insistence, we inform Princess Zelda of the kidnappings happening throughout Hyrule. Here, with no proof but our word, she entrusts us with one of the keys needed to draw our fated blade. Normally, items like this are the reward given at the end of a dungeon, each precious gem a proof of Link's mastery over power, wisdom, and courage. But here, it's rewarded just by Link showing up, when he's lost to the only real foe he's faced so far. In Hyrule Castle, a series of paintings retell the history of the land, and a brief retelling of the events of A Link to the Past. Long ago, Hyrule was engulfed in a bitter civil war over the golden power left behind by the goddesses, the Triforce, which could grant the wish of any who held it. The royal family brought the 7 sages of that era together to seal it away from the mortal world, so that it would no longer struggle over its power. But the great demon Lord Ganon found its hiding place, and yet so too was he slayed by the hero. Here we learn something new. After the events of the previous game, the Triforce was split apart to keep it from its use. Wisdom stayed with the royal family. Power fell back into Ganon's hands, somehow sealed away beyond the grave. And courage would be hidden away in the spirit of a hero to come, who would only appear when the world needed him most. And when we finally meet her in the middle of an introduction, she interrupts herself with the sudden recognition of us. While this is a Link already familiar with the rest of his countrymen, this is the first time these two in particular have met. But we learn through the grapevine that this Zelda is already quite familiar with the hero. While Hyrule's queen is, as always, absent, so too is the king in this era. It's mentioned so briefly, and if you blink you might miss it, but the young princess of this time is an orphan, ruling her kingdom from a young age alone. Rumors tell that she wanders the castle at night, pining at the illustrations of a Zelda and her hero with a tinge that can only be read as romantic. She cuts her own sentence off with the familiar "it's you." Call me a sucker, but this "I'd know you in any lifetime" bit is one of the 5 secret sauces that Echoes of Wisdom was missing. These two are always together no matter the universe. I often think it's best that they remain somewhat undefined twin flames, and most entries toe this line quite deftly, but when it comes to romance, when it works, it works. Normally I wouldn't be a fan of such overt, straight love, but there is an awful gay man doing the most all over the place here, so this time I'll let it slide. This Zelda has precious little screen time, a fact that would normally be a significant thorn in my side if not for a particular someone we will meet in a bit. So with what time we do have left with her, this game does a great job at making this Zelda stand out among her peers. This young, lonely monarch with heart-shaped bangs who has an unrequited love with a painting, and we're just the type of guy to fit the part. This subtle subversion of having the Pendant of Courage awarded early actually allows Zelda to enact a rarely shown moment of wisdom in the plot. Her particular, and in her position understandable, fixation with the legend allowed her to recognize us as this era's hero early and give us the needed MacGuffin without proving ourselves. Later in the story, in an actual they should have flown the eagles there moment, Yuga locks both Zelda and ostensibly the pendant away from us. Without it, we would have no Master Sword and no way in, but her foresight makes that moot. A simple but clever shuffling of events can indeed tell a very different story. When you're making chili 2, you don't have to add too many new spices to the pot to make it as good as chili. This game frequently prompts you to stop playing. Every 40 minutes or so, a save point will flail rapidly to get your attention, and asks the player if they'd like to stop. This was a relatively commonplace practice on Nintendo's handheld software, and while it's certainly annoying, it does really outline how well paced this game is. The near-hourly interruption almost always found me right outside of the next dungeon. Without making it obvious, the game naturally carves itself into neat little pieces. I look at my recordings for this game and am impressed by just how tidy the whole affair is. These early game dungeons do well to make themselves stand out. While it's true that dungeons in previous entries would have multiple floors, here there is a sharpened focus on making that height apparent. There's a reason they always show off the Tower of Hera in marketing. There's something thrilling about bounding ever higher on the outside of a dungeon's walls. Bosses in this game are highly memorable, often looking grotesque and monstrous. Strange fleshy automatons and wriggling eldritch blobs. His collection of sage portraits complete, Yuga sets his sights on the princess herself, wanting to forever capture her beauty for his own. Once we do eventually pull the sword, we storm Hyrule Castle, slaying Yuga's painted soldiers in our mad dash to rescue her. And again, while I know that because of the handheld I'm playing it on, it looks like this, in the back of my mind I see the illustration from before, and it sells me on the idea that, even as I'm playing now, it looks like this. Easily outmatched, Yuga flees with the flattened princess, and so we travel through the crack to the other side. There's something undeniably difficult about making a case for a game like this. I struggled at first to find what exactly it was I wanted to say about it. For a long time I thought about calling this essay The Last True Zelda, and while evocative and a good hook, I couldn't bring myself to believe in a thesis so sensational. All this talk of what Zelda should be feels misguided. The truth is, I don't think there necessarily has to be a proper shape a Zelda game has to take. On release, Wind Waker was received as a black sheep of the family, thought to be a regression towards a more childish tone in a series people were eager to see grow up. I actually had kind of the same reaction to the subsequent release of Twilight Princess. Wind Waker brought me back to the tone I imagined for the series when I played its pixelated adventures, its abstraction allowing for a kind of expression impossible for a game that sought realism as its aim. But even still, bringing that expectation to Twilight Princess robbed me of an experience that I could have enjoyed. And someday I know I need to look at it again. In an interview with Zelda Universe about A Link Between Worlds, Aonuma actually gives an interesting insight. I think the project that reflects our reaction to fan opinion is probably Twilight Princess. The incentive for us to create that different version of the Zelda universe was certainly as a result of the Wind Waker criticism that we received. Fans were saying that it wasn't what they were looking for, it wasn't what they were hoping for. This breaks my heart a little. This idea that the work has to be shaped by what the audience thinks it should be is not good. I think that being in love in the way a fan is in love with something can obviously lead to passion, but somehow this admittance here sounds self-conscious. Either it's admitting to not having confidence in your own vision, or it's an odd and less cynical way to say that he course-corrected due to market pressures. Even despite my misgivings about Breath of the Wild and its dubious sequel, if the series doesn't evolve past this point, I worry for its future. I still find a place in my heart for the warmth of that first playthrough. Despite the chance for disappointment, I want to see bold new choices being made, and there is an undeniable appeal to what the Wild games are trying to do, even if they don't fully succeed in my eyes. That's kind of the point and the benefit to having a series like this, an iterative one with a familiar shape that can deepen and broaden itself with retelling and change. There is concept art from a time when Breath of the Wild was going to be a proper modern AU, a delivery on the idea being teased in Skyward Sword's hometown, and at first I balked at the idea, but as time has passed I can only want to at least try it out. If someone has a great idea for a Zelda with choo-choo trains, I'm all for it. As long as there is something to say, a choice being made, and an honest realization of a vision, I don't think Zelda has to match a singular mold. The series has been going on for 40 years now. Its longevity necessitates fresh ideas and new perspectives. It might take me a while to get used to it, but if Link really needs to be a grizzled man on a classic pulp fantasy adventure or fight aliens in a sci-fi future, I think I'm willing to at least give it a try. And so too do I take this game for what it wants to be, a victory lap, a love letter, a celebration and repainting of an old friend. As mentioned, I had to dip my toes back into the old classic that A Link Between Worlds is based on, and if I'm being honest, it probably appeals more to the idea of what the ignorant part of me might think of as this true Zelda compared to its younger brother that I choose to call favorite. The difficulty and puzzle complexity blows its sequel out of the water. It executes its dark and light world mechanic with significantly more elegance, allowing you to transition between the two at whim to solve puzzles that at the time could only be called mind-bending. But even still, I fall short of finishing a playthrough of that one. It unquestionably asks more of me. It delivers more on the promise of dungeon delving and head scratching. But I just keep thinking about how I want to do another playthrough of A Link Between Worlds on hard mode, this time foregoing any upgrades to my armor and instead beelining for the final sword upgrade. This is an actual benefit of the open-air system that Zelda seems to now be unable to move away from, being able to customize your run, doing what you want when you want to, taking advantage of the foreknowledge only a previous playthrough could give. It's also the appeal of a short runtime. The momentum of a playthrough of this game makes it go by in a flash. It's interesting. I don't mind the absence of a critical path. It doesn't feel like I'm missing the comfort of a bespoke, intentional design because even if they had to make sure you always had the tool required, there was always a quick, fun little solve. Getting to pick my own path feels freeing here since I already know what a more defined adventure looks like in this Hyrule. Splitting this game into 2 acts is necessary to give this game a feeling of discovery and adventure. The Master Sword moment of the typical Zelda plot allows the world and your perspective of it to change. There's a dark world, or a bad future, or a sunken Hyrule. This allows the plot to move, keeping the next world and its dungeons hidden behind linearity. I know, of course, that there are plenty of other ways to have a moving narrative in an open-air game, of course, but I haven't seen any plotting that's really worked in those Zelda games yet, save for killer finales. They seem to need the plot to have already happened before you got there. This isn't an issue exclusive to Zelda games, by the way. Being set up as a Pendant's Sword Second World Zelda game, it still afforded plot. As mentioned, there are still choke points, too. In order to get here, you need this, and once you're there, you get this, which you need to do this. You can put a little linearity in your open world games if you want. They can live together just fine. Like complementary colors. There are undeniable indication of modern Nintendo's worst habits beginning to form here. A constant dangling of keys to motivate me through short bursts of action. But that doesn't really matter. It's fun. It's funky. It reminds me of being 5 years old and it has that certain je ne sais quoi. I know this is an intellectual black hole to find myself in, but it's the most honest way I can put it. So until I really look at every game, I guess that's just it. The X factor. That ineffable something. That's what a Zelda game has to have. It has to be in love with itself, and this one is. However, something interesting happens in an interview with Spike. Aonuma has this to say when asked about the origin of the wall merging mechanic. First of all, we were trying to think of a new way that Link could interact with the world, and one of the things that I remembered was in Ocarina of Time, the Phantom Ganon. There's a part there where he turned into a painting. But we thought it might be interesting to give Link that ability, to have him be able to turn into a painting and go in the walls, then move through the walls, and then use that ability to get around obstacles, and go to places that he hadn't been able to go before. So basically, that was where the idea started. No mention is made of the trio of smaller names who worked tirelessly and without much support to come up with the core idea for this game. Shikata's epiphany isn't mentioned. For some needless reason, Ocarina of Time and Aonuma get the credit. It isn't like the truth is being buried. I don't think there's some kind of conspiracy or anything. The Iwata Asks interviews are widely available, and I'm sure most people interested in this kind of thing read those interviews, and not some obscure Spike article that I had to fetch with the Wayback Machine. But it's just, in the retelling, it's interesting what truth and what kind of story is told, depending on who's telling it. Lorule is a pun so obvious and fitting that I could be convinced it had been here since Hyrule's inception. The other side of the strange portal that Yuga spirited himself away into sees us in a dark reflection of the green meadows of Hyrule. This functions as the dark world of this game. To my extreme confusion, it does virtually nothing to make itself really stand apart visually or geographically from the dark world of A Link to the Past, and yet takes great pains to ensure that we, the obsessive lore examiners, understand that it is meant to be a world completely unto its own. As mentioned, in that game, the Triforce was hidden away in a secret place known as the Sacred Realm. This is where Ganon in the distant past stole the Triforce, turning Hyrule's Sacred Realm into the twisted dark world that we trekked through in the previous game. Lorule is altogether something different. Instead, it is a mirror of Hyrule, the shadow, the other side of the looking glass. If you're going to make something new by making a copy, you should cut out the pieces that don't fit. If Lorule is to be a replica of the Dark World from before for any other reason than development convenience, I can't help but side-eye this whole affair a bit. The good news is they made it far more thematically rich than it ever was before. The slightly observant player will notice that Link has hung Majora's Mask on his wall. While I think this is in part meant to be a fun Easter egg, quite literally being a hint at the future 3DS remake of Majora's Mask according to Aonuma, I also think it keys a certain type of player into the themes of this game. I've gone on endlessly about the repeating nature of Hyrule's mythos, but it's true that not every adventure we share with our hero follows such a rigid structure. Majora's Mask was a slightly hastily made sequel to Ocarina, reusing its assets to paint a bizarre picture of grief and loss, of friends leaving you behind and what you might do to get them back. A world apart from Hyrule and in some ways seeming to reject their gods and blasphemy. So I think that besides just being here for marketing, having the mask so openly in the first seconds of this game prepped me for the coming of Lorule. In many ways, it functions much the same as Majora's Termina. Our Lorule is filled with dark reflections of the bright, quirky denizens above. Our first moments in Lorule have us continuing our chase after the Mad Yuga. As always, Link is a moment too late as Yuga enacts his dark ritual. Using the sages as his brush, a dark magic circle is drawn, and both Ganon's corpse and the Triforce of Power are pulled from beyond the pale. Yuga siphons both into himself, transforming into a hulking beast. This is another one of this game's fumbles. From now on, Yuga only has a few more lines of dialogue in the script. The rest of his time in the game is spent being a retread of so many final bosses from before. His memorable personality, his flamboyant mannerisms, and haughty attitude are exchanged for an overused trope of a man who is Beast Ganon in all but name. Before he overwhelms us, he is stopped by the thorny magic of a familiar face. This is Princess Hilda, lone ruler of the doomed kingdom. Compared to the delicate light and hope of our princess, she is somber and moody. But as above, so below, she holds the beast in place so we may continue the rest of our journey. She instructs us to find and reunite the lost sages that have been scattered throughout her sad country. It's only in this playthrough that I've realized while most citizens have a counterpart, Lorule is a depiction of a world without its sages. Our monarch here reigns completely alone, no Impa to act as her ever-present aide. No little boy plays in the yard of the blacksmith, and his brow seems ever more furrowed for it. Thieves' Town has no wise elder, no Sahasrahla or Asfala. The town is overrun with monsters, bandits, and cultists who gibber on about the sacred power of the mask. There is no Queen Orin, nor even any indication that the Zora of this world have a society. They seem as bloodthirsty as the rest of the fiends that fill the land. The skies are only full of threats. No Irene zooms above. There is no sanctuary to the gods here, and so no young maiden attends it. Only an abandoned philosopher in a cave who bemoans the world falling out of worship for the divine. Rosso also doesn't have a mirror here. I'm sorry, Rosso. I always have to look you up. What's up with you, man? I think he's like a Hylian frozen in the process of mutating into a Goron. I really don't know what his deal is, actually, but I'm sure Lorule is worse off without his equivalent. Lorule is divided into disparate chunks. Accessing them requires finding hidden cracks that have split open throughout Hyrule. The verticality of dungeons is even more pronounced in the dangling ice palace, leaving it feeling like a delicate chandelier hanging above the mouth of a volcano. Thieves' Hideout plays with height as you go up and down its prison cells full of booby traps. There were a few times in the Swamp Palace and the Dark Palace where I found myself completely stumped. When I realized what I missed, I felt a bit foolish, but the fact that this game still has moments like this speaks to it treading a careful line. It's a necessary evil, since most of our tools are found in Ravio's shop, that the dungeons themselves can't hold the keys to our problems. This leads most of the optional chests and dungeons to be stuffed with rupees or, disappointingly, monster parts. While the rupees are always a welcome surprise, it isn't until the dungeons of Lorule that more worthwhile treasure is found. Optional upgrades are rewarded by solving the game's more dastardly puzzles. There are 4 pieces of the new Master Ore to find in Lorule's more obscure corners, allowing the blacksmiths to fully upgrade and change the Master Sword. This ability to physically alter the blade in such a way is unique to these 2 games. It's silly seeing an item that is usually treated with such reverence now looking like a cherry ice pop, or like it's made out of butter. It's a uniquely silly visual upgrade that feels like it's from another era, because it is. In addition, there are 2 upgrades to Link's tunics, which are all but necessary if you are playing on the needlessly punishing hero mode. Overall, these are game-changing enough that I realize that you don't have to put progression items in dungeons if you really want to design your game in an open-air fashion, but having some kind of noteworthy treasure goes a long way in making their depths feel worth combing in a way that the last 3 games have seemed uninterested in doing. The permanent treasure in Turtle Rock is the Hyrule shield, and here I'd like to take a brief pause. As we discussed earlier in the video, Link himself has worn many faces throughout his life, and so too has his equipment. While he obviously can't have a whole-ass Christian cross on his shield forever... Oh, by the way, look at this art from the Link to the Past guidebook of him praying to a giant, actual real-life crucifix. What is going on? It took a long time for the Hyrule shield to find its now standardized design. However, I think this is an unfortunate move. Unlike the Master Sword, which is meant to be the same object from game to game, the Hyrule shield is just one of many Link uses. It isn't some singularly magical relic. His standard shield in Majora's Mask is slightly altered, and both the shields of Wind Waker clearly harken back to the Hyrule shield's design, but artistically changed to match that Link and the kind of world he lives in. And so in my opinion, of all the things not to standardize for the sake of letting each Link stand apart, the shield seems like the obvious option to leave open to interpretation. I honestly would rather skip the Hyrule shield in this game. It doesn't really look all that good on this version of Link. It looks awkward and bloated when it's forced down to match his proportions. There's already a shield design unique to this kind of Link that would have worked great. So this insistence on the Hyrule shield feels like a bit of needless brand homogeny. The game has no problem letting you become completely overpowered. Finding every Mai rewards Link with a spin attack that is preposterously large, and seems to do magnitudes more damage than a normal sword strike. There are the right amount of heart pieces, not too many that it becomes hard to track them, but enough that there's normally one right around the corner where you think it ought to be. There's an optional dungeon called the Treacherous Tower. Here you can take on waves of enemies that make you wish there was, I don't know, some kind of roguelike Zelda game where you could explore an endless dungeon, fighting enemies and getting upgrades. We'll talk about it. The minigames here are unfortunately a bit lacking. The Cucco dodging game is fun enough. Both of the Rupee Rush games all but require you to find your own stopwatch, as the threshold for winning heart pieces requires pretty exact timing. My final heart piece in most every playthrough is the wretched Octoball Rally. I'm sure there are people who are great at this game and love it, but I truly despise it. I, do not get it. I've read the rules and never really feel like I'm in control of where my ball is going. It's just like real life. The only thing I'm missing is my dad being mad at me. But still, that frustration lasts just long enough that an eventual win is joyful in its catharsis. Also, to editorialize a little bit, the music here is stanky as hell. God damn! Here, how about we listen to it while you watch me fail at this stupid minigame. Oh, hey, oh, ooh, hey, oh, hey! La la la. Gotta hit that little baseball. La la la. La la la. La la la. Da da da. Da da da. Ooh, hey, ooh, hey. I think at this point you get it. The baseball game kind of sucks. With every item bought from his shop, Ravio takes it easy. I'll just let what he says next speak for itself. For a long time, I believed that if you put your ear to the ground, you'd hear the world's heart beating. That the world just goes on living whether you were there or not. Weird, right? And sort of sad. So I've been listening here for a while, and you know the only heart I've heard? Mine. I couldn't be happier. I've got a new outlook on life, and it's all thanks to you, Mr. Hero. He's so weird. He's impossible to not be in love with. Eventually, every sage is saved, and so with their rescue, a ritual is performed, their salvation being the proof of our rightful place as hero, and we are rewarded with our piece of divinity. Triforce of courage in hand, we finally approach Lorule Castle to slay Yuga and save both princesses. This final approach feels notably truncated. While I think this game is overall masterfully paced, I'm still surprised by the dungeon's abrupt end in every playthrough. The 4 main wings of the castle act as a final test of sorts for a few of our tools. The complexity of these puzzles are fitting for a final dungeon. Even in my umpteenth playthrough, there was a brief moment in the bomb puzzle room where I truly felt stumped. I done went and forgot that I could do the old Egyptian hieroglyph scoot. The developers clearly were quite the fans of baiting WoW masters into helping you solve problems, and there were just enough reprises of this puzzle melody that it was a little joyful triumph to me when the WoW master and Agimos and I reenacted our own little Three Swords adventure. However, this dogged pursuit of having the game broken up into 30 to 40 minute chunks ends up dampening this last approach. There is an unshakable feeling of a missing climax when we reach the final boss's door. So I delay it. I found every heart piece, rescued every Mai, maxed out my rupee count after the last climb of the treacherous tower, and looking at my gear screen, there really isn't much else to do. I mean, besides maxing out the number of my monster parts, but that would be crazy. I don't need 99 of each, right? Just so my gear screen looks completely tidy. So, since we're being exhaustive, I can't believe I haven't mentioned these, but monster parts are random drops that can be used to make potions or some shit. I don't know. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm a boy with 5 bottles full of captive fairies and nothing else, so I guess Echoes was right. Should have called them smoothies, Grandma. Yeah, so sometimes it happens like this. I don't want to fight the final boss, read the final chapter, or say goodbye. I guess if I'm being really honest with myself, this is the part of me that doesn't like change. It might seem like cold feet, this tendency to sometimes just abandon the thing right before the ending, but it's actually quite the opposite. I don't want A Link Between Worlds to be over yet. When I first played it when I was 22, it made me feel a little bit like I was 5. Now I'm 34 and it makes me feel a little bit like I'm 22, and that me may not have known it at the time, but it's nice to feel like him again. Back then, I was still just young enough to not have to justify feeling this way about something. That innocent part of my brain didn't really engage critically. It was enough for this game to just be joyfully Zelda. I'm going to refrain from using the word, but there is a part of my brain that gets an inexplicable satisfaction from this kind of repetitive task. In my quest to max out my monster parts, I climb Hilda's castle endlessly. There are many more efficient ways to accomplish what I'm after, of course, but there's something about finding this cadence that is nearly addictive. I'm like a dog getting stuck, scratching an itch. The final castle theme loops in a maddening fashion, and I can tell that if left unchecked, this could be the euphoric insanity that comes from an obsession run wild. For those who know, there is of course one last impossible challenge. The final stage of the Cucco dodging minigame is called Endless, but there is a reward for making it through the full 15 minutes of perfect dodging it requires for completion. The developers said that no one on the staff ever finished the task, and so I think that the best quality footage I could find for it is tool-assisted should tell you all you need to know. I'd personally truly rather die than go through that hell myself. The reward of a gentle kiss from a husky chicken is tempting though, but I'll be satisfied watching someone else do it. Even I have my limits. And there it is. No stone left unturned. I've eaten every morsel off the plate. I've become so full from A Link Between Worlds that it hurts a little bit. It's a borrowed mantra, but if you ask me how big a portion of this game you should pour me, I'd have to answer I want way too much. But the carton runs dry. The world needs saving. I really can't delay any longer. We re-enter the room. We saw Hilda fighting to keep Yuga sealed and find the beast gone. After saving some of the sages, the camera would cut to Hilda expressing jealousy to Zelda's painting, envious that she is a princess from a kingdom always fated to have happy endings. And here we find her standing alone, still brooding over the portrait of our Zelda. She draws the Triforce of Wisdom from Zelda's hand as the music swells and tells us the legend of her people. Like Hyrule, Lorule was once engulfed in war over the sacred power left behind by the goddesses. However, where the royal family of Hyrule ended the conflict by hiding the Triforce away, the royal family of Lorule committed the ultimate blasphemy and had it destroyed in totality. Without its foundation, its connection to divinity, Lorule fell to darkness and began to crumble. In some ways, this is what the Null we met in Echoes must be explaining. Without the golden light of creation, I can't help but notice that Lorule is engulfed with dark, fathomless void. And so Hilda tells it plainly. What dark wisdom? She used the shape of a Zelda narrative as a ritual to summon the Triforce of our realm and now intends to kill us for our peace. While it's obvious that Hilda is a reflection of Zelda, it should now be obvious that Yuga is the same for Ganon. There's a wide reading that these characters from Lorule represent the opposite of the virtues of Hyrule's Triforce bearers, but I don't fully buy that. I see them as shadows, the same but viewed under a different light. The game underlines this so that we are all on the same page, so I will as well. Link, ever the hero, represents the Triforce of courage. Zelda, the dutiful priestess, the Triforce of wisdom, and Ganon, ever on top, holding the Triforce of power. And here are Lorulean counterparts. Hilda isn't unwise, she's desperate. In a lot of ways, by basically reenacting A Link to the Past to bring the Triforce of Courage out, you could argue that she almost outsmarted the gods. I may have been a dumb 20-something who recently found a love of weed and alcohol, but she tricked me on my first playthrough too. While she sicks the beastly Yuga on us, thinking of him as another pawn, that she doesn't see his betrayal and subsequent absorption of her coming shows that her desperation did in fact make her blind. She remains convinced that hers is a world fated to never have a happy ending, so her frantic swing here feels like a last scream against the inevitable. While she remains aware of the Zelda cycle in a way that few others are, it would seem that she chose to ignore the threat that a red-haired interloper with a lust for power brought to the table. It's hard to see Yuga as opposite of Ganon in too many ways. While certainly having his own joie de vivre, he plays the same beats Ganon would in the story. I'm sure a tough guy like the dwarf would hate to admit it, but he and Yuga share a flair for theatrics, and both are always begging fate to punish them for their delusional hubris. I kind of see Yuga as the femininity that Ganon is unable to express. For a man who comes from a race of all women, he seems to reject it in himself, filling his armies with pigmen and muscular bull soldiers and ripped centaur lion dudes. If you ask me, he's trying too hard and telling on himself a little. Even Lorule itself is far more than just a dark Hyrule, it's just another way things could have gone. It isn't like Hyrule's plan of hiding the Triforce is any more wise. It never does anything but delay the inevitable rise of the Demon King. This is the divine prank that the goddesses play on both villain and hero. While the power-hungry heart can never make a wish outright due to needing to be balanced, so too does it seem that the foundation of the world is predicated on a demon lord of power. There doesn't seem to be a perfect answer for what to do. That's kind of the fringe benefit of multiverse Elseworld stories. The truth is, whether people want to admit it or not, the broad shape of our core 3 is pretty unshakable. This is kind of both flaw and feature. Much can be expressed with this kind of iterative story, but more often than not, these characters are limited in their range of expression due to being icons of a, let's just face it, brand. So, by giving us a version of them from a different world and a very different status quo, we don't see their opposites, but instead see a glimpse at our beloved characters that we might not otherwise be afforded. And so too does it seem Lorule is a world not just without its sages or Triforce, but a world without a Link. No hero save for us as a manipulated surrogate. This final fight does leave a little bit to be desired. We have 2 new villains here that could offer us any kind of assortment of final challenges, so it's genuinely a bummer to have it be a retread of an all-too-familiar battle with a trident-wielding beast. I get why it plays out this way, I guess. It's just hard not to want a final fight with Yuga, with souped-up painting magic, or a magic-slinging Hilda. Not Yuga wearing a Ganon suit. And yet, even still, there are things to like about its execution. It seems surprisingly hard to communicate strength while still offering a challenge when facing a lumbering foe. But rightfully with Yuga, you have to wait for openings to get safe swings. Going in wildly is a guaranteed knockout in hero mode. There's a nice little ebb and flow to the blows you exchange, and the battle does a great job at heightening tension. It wouldn't be a pseudo-Ganon fight without energy tennis, and folks, I suck absolute dog shit at this one. God bless the amount of fairies you can carry with you. I guess one of those potions would have been helpful at this point, but sorry, Grandma, you should have called them smoothies. You can upgrade your net at the Treacherous Tower, and it kinda helps with the timing here, but I really struggled to make it work. Hey, word to the wise though, once he doubles up on balls, just keep mashing the B button like a ding-dong, it works just fine. We're given one final gift from our princess, the ever-faithful Bow of Light. Well, yeah, hold up actually, where the fuck was that thing in Echoes? That's like her main thing! Ugh! Shooting a painted arrow at a flattened Yuga is so satisfying. Letting loose the final arrow so it wraps all the way around the room and into his back is genius. I love that they make you figure it out on your own. Makes me feel smart. I don't know, imagine this is an open-air solve-it-yourself puzzle. But even with Yuga outright killed, Hilda doesn't intend to stop. Her desperation has her crawling towards Link while he readies his blade. We don't say this part out loud too often, but Link solves his problems through killing. It's normally a-okay, of course, because we mostly kill kings of evil and their malice-filled spawn, but Link is unquestionably not a guy who solves problems with words. But he is. Hey! He calls himself cowardly. He was once Hilda's faithful servant, but once he learned of her plans to steal the light from Hyrule, he ran away into the other world. Running to find help isn't cowardly, especially when you're trying to stop a friend who won't listen to you anymore who's about to do something bad. It's interesting. There's that feeling that you get way too powerful way too quick in this game. Thanks to this greedy loudmouth, you can kit Link out with his most gleefully powerful arsenal yet for a low, low price. I mean, come on. He's the link between worlds. He got here before we even met the princess to make sure we went right where we needed to with as much helpful stuff as we could carry. Ravio's journey is funny. While Link slowly fills his inventory throughout his campaigns, Ravio's happy retirement is met once he's emptied his own. It's such a good twist. His name is almost like one you might see on the third save file of a second-hand cartridge. A Link who speaks can talk reason. He is the hero of Lorule. If Link had cut Hilda down, only Hyrule would have really been saved. Ravio explains that even if it means annihilation, to take from our world would be selling Lorule's soul. It isn't worth it. Despite feeling like he ultimately failed, Ravio's fated duty is the same as Link's. He just wanted to save her from all of this. And so she yields. We are given our sacred treasure back, and with the last of the painting magic, Hilda returns us to the land of Hyrule, severing the connection between our two worlds. With the faint golden light of our world gone, we see that Lorule fades even deeper into darkness. This seems the ultimate, almost unbearable punishment for blasphemy. They have to wait in the dark while their ruined kingdom further crumbles. No choice but to hold for oblivion. As always, though, we live in our happy ending. In a rare glimpse of an unsullied sacred realm, our two leads find themselves in a tableau from heaven. Reflecting, Zelda says it herself. She thinks Hilda is wrong about them being entirely different. In her shoes, she might do the same for her own kingdom. Despite her dark wisdom landing her as one of the freshest Zelda villains we've had in ages, Hilda is short-sighted. Lorule isn't doomed. It makes sense that her hopeless goth cousin didn't see it coming, but Lorule can get a happy ending too. There's a reward for putting the Triforce back together. They've still got that wish. It might be my favorite ending to a Zelda game. Ganon is normally proven right. Might does make right when the day is saved through conflict. But this time, kindness saves the day. Hope wins out. Sometimes, instead of fighting, we have to trust that good, kind people will do right by us. There are, of course, tender moments in other Zelda games, but no ending is quite so uniquely compassionate. It's so smartly written, without having to ever say the quiet part out loud. Ravio's hopeful appeal to understanding, hope for there being some other way, is returned a thousandfold. He smiles ear to ear as if a gambit has paid off. He knew in a way that she never could that these two blondies will always do the right thing. I almost hope that we never see Lorule again. This is such a charming little fable and such a perfect little sequel. It was wrapped up with such a nice bow that I think to visit it again might stand to tarnish its tidiness. I'm in a unique position with how I've experienced these last playthroughs. I've had the luxury of nice speakers. A dual monitor setup is actually perfect for DS games, and the game works well with a wired Xbox controller and a mouse. While there is a small part of me that misses the cheesy stereoscopic 3D, the way I've experienced this game will probably be the definitive one for me moving forward. Sadly, given the nature of how I played it though, I was unable to access most of the Street Pass features. For those unfamiliar, Street Pass was a system used by the 3DS and much of its software. If you had your 3DS in your pocket and passed someone else who had done the same, your devices would exchange information. Often this would be in the form of the user's Mii, but for this game you create shadow links for fellow players to fight. This is a gimmick from an era of Nintendo that I really do miss. It's such a superfluous add-on that adds such potential charm. As mentioned though, I was 22 when this game came out and I had already settled into my shut-in ways, so while I never got to enjoy it myself, it's a real treat watching other people's videos. The old man who runs the Street Pass function of this game is rumored to be the Link from A Link to the Past, and it's true he does wear a familiar green tunic. The culmination of this mode ends in a likely non-canonical but still fun encounter with the old man wielding the Master Sword. I don't think missing out on this really sullies my experience with the game, but from a preservationist perspective, it's interesting how time is beginning to make the content of some classics inaccessible. However, if Nintendo gussied up the game and offered it to me on the Switch 2 for $69.99, I'll be real with you folks, I'll be first in line. As much as I struggle with some of their modern software, they have me right where they want me here. And truth be told, I think this is a game that deserves new life on the Switch so more people can experience it. Just for the love of God, don't let the plastic toy aesthetic anywhere near this one. While we're throwing shade at Echoes, it's enlightening to now have an example to compare it directly with. Between these two, we can see what makes reusing a map palatable and interesting, and what it takes for it to feel like a bore. There were 22 years between A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. A revisit felt like seeing an old friend, but not just 11 years later in Echoes of Wisdom, that same world feels tired. I think this is more an example of passion than absence making the heart grow fonder. Interviews about A Link Between Worlds showed that, lazy or not, remaking this classic world was a labor of love. I read every interview I could find about Echoes of Wisdom, and I saw no similar statements of inspiration for its reuse of the map. Also with A Link Between Worlds, we see that while the gimmick was indeed the initial design point of this game, that didn't somehow make it unable to have something to say. Not just something interesting to say about how we treat enemies, and even ourselves, but also something interesting to say about Zelda as a story, and what kind of shape it takes. Too often I hear subpar storytelling being excused by idea-first development, and frankly, it's annoying to imply that the two should in any way be mutually exclusive. Despite what I said about wanting this game to remain a pristine little perfect object, a commenter informed me that my pal Ravio is in Hyrule Warriors, and where before I wrote that game off as a cheap-looking, mediocre spin-off, wouldn't you know it, I'm now tantalized by the sweet scent of fan service. Did you guys know they had Skull Kid in this one? I had no idea there was a version of this game that seems to be a Sugar Rush infusion of panic-inducing nostalgia. I'm only really familiar with its sequels, which seem to be very self-serious Wild-era games. So, I mean, sure, if someday someone has another compelling story to tell with that dark reflection of Hyrule, I can't say I'd be too bothered. All I know is that there's a certain type of guy that this specific game was made for, and it's me. I may have finished 2 playthroughs in the span of a few weeks and dedicated far more time than I probably should to writing about it, but I'll be damned if I'm not going in for the triple dip. In the grand tapestry that makes up these worlds, how nice is it that there's now a little bunny in its margins? Whew, wowzers! Now that was a whole lot of words about a game I did think was pretty good. If you're here listening at the very end, I can only say thank you. This game means a lot to me, and I am so incredibly lucky to have found people who are interested in hearing me talk about it. Since we're at the self-indulgent end of a self-indulgent essay here, though, I've got to ask you guys a few questions. I'm only somewhat jokingly convinced that the Mandela effect is a real phenomenon, and I swear I remember there being a version of the Mad Batter in A Link Between Worlds. Do you remember this guy from the SNES game? He would half your magic, but actually he halved how much it cost to use magic items. I spent all of those playthroughs of A Link Between Worlds telling myself I wouldn't look it up, convinced I would eventually run into him, and then nothing. I did look it up, and he really doesn't seem to be in this game, but, I still really remember his appearance.
I swear, I remember thinking that they hammed him up a bit too much, and that new players were extra confused by the magic halving system. I think the truth is out there. Also, Hero Mode gives you access to a diary in Ravio's house that gives you more context about him. And I swear on Dompe's graves that I remember these very pages on Hilda's desk also being readable in Hero Mode. Am I crazy? Is anyone else from the readable Hilda Notes timeline? The truth is out there. In addition, I was making an effort to try and find every Easter egg I could for this game. I didn't realize that you could enter the paintings in Hyrule Castle. It's actually quite cute. Also, in an interview with the composer, I found out that the performers at the Milk Bar add the Ballad of the Goddesses to their repertoire if you complete Hero Mode. How neat! While the game uses MIDI instruments, the flute being played is a recording from the composer himself. If you listen carefully, you can hear him clearing his throat. I also ran across a Reddit post that has now seemingly disappeared that said there was a secret room with extra paintings found through a crack accessed by a mergeable wall in Sahasrah's house. I've since lost the post and can't find any mention of it anywhere else on the internet, but who knows? Maybe the truth could be out there times 3. As for future videos, I still have the same old irons in the fire. I'll save mentioning those again and instead tell you more about what's coming up next month. I've spent the last year or so falling questionably in love with Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete. I think it's actually my favorite Animal Crossing game, and I'm not entirely sure it's for all the right reasons. But I really do want to get my thoughts out about it. In the meantime, I've got to find a way to get some of your camper cards, so I can include some of you and your animal buddies in the footage. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the community post for details on that. I mean, while we're at it, if you really did like this video, give it a like. I'm learning how to ride this bucking bronco of an algo, so I hope you understand that my supplication here is mandatory. Speaking of appealing to the whims of a fickle god, I've recently been having my patience tested by RNGesus and Mario Kart World. I'm actually shamelessly addicted to this game. I'm over like 200 hours in and I've barely left Knockout Tour. I'd love to talk about it someday. I feel like a small minority. While I understand its detractors, I'm pretty convinced Mario Kart World is a complete triumph. I'll also say that I really do want to eventually take a look at every top-down Zelda game. I mean, I would hate to pigeonhole myself. Just like with my Deltarune video, I'm going to have to keep making essays on other topics for myself if for no one else, but I know that momentum will make me take a look at every last one of these damn Zelda games if I can. If I continue this trend of moving backwards through the top-down releases, excluding you, I'm sorry, Triforce Heroes, someday I'll find buddies to play you with. I suppose the next top-down Zelda games would have to be the DS entries. To be frank, I wasn't particularly fond of these games on release, but time, and your comments, have softened my heart on them enough that I'm pretty excited to give them a second look. I know DS emulation has come a long way, but we'll have to see how grabbing footage for these shakes out. How on earth am I supposed to solve that one stupid puzzle in Phantom Hourglass without closing an actual DS? So I suppose in the meantime, if the spirit really moves me, I wouldn't mind giving one of those 3D Zelda games a thorough look. I might just even make a poll and see what you guys think, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay. I guess that's all that I have for today. That's all our business. Thank you for lending me your ear, and until next time, snooze out! What dark wisdom. She used the shape of a Zelda narrative as a ritual to summon the Triforce of our realm, and now intends to have us killed for our peace. She serves complete cunt. Wait, hold on. I actually don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Can I? I mean, she does. She's crazy. Hold on. What is this? Oh, hold on. Good deal. Hold on. She serves a complete cunt. Thank you, Google Docs.